Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whenever time it is. Welcome to Story Mode. A whole, well, not new, but like a return to the podcast series we once did, where we talk about the stories in games. And we're your, well, I don't want to say hosts, we're just people who happen to be conveniently near a microphone. I'm Chris, and we got...
I'm Ben.
I'm Taylor.
I'm Bertus.
And yeah, we're Co-Operatives. So thanks for tuning in and listening to Story Mode. This is sort of our redo pilot, kind of. We're exploring what we want to, how we're going to format.
Season 2, where changes happen.
I like to call it Season 1, and the original stuff is Season 0.
The original stuff was a pilot that somebody thankfully picked up.
But to start our sort of new block of Story Mode podcasts, I thought we'd try something a little bit different than how things are going to go in the future. And that is, there's an article published in The Atlantic about 2 months ago by Ian Bogust called Video Games Are Better Without Stories. If you're listening, you may have read it already. There will be a link on wherever this is, so you can go and read it yourself. I would highly suggest reading it before you listen to us, because this is our response to that article, because it essentially is challenging our very existence before we've even really begun to exist.
Yeah.
So I guess that's what we've got to do. Are video games better without stories, guys?
I mean, we've built our whole life around video games. I hate to think about somebody tearing that away from me.
Yeah.
Well, it's not like if we decide if we agree with him that like video games are gone forever. It's just they don't have stories anymore.
It's probably why people also oppose this article so vehemently. It was just like he was questioning the core of a lot of people's existence right now, and that was just like, no.
I as a whole do not agree that by any stretch of the imagination that video games are better without a narrative. Also, I'm going to go pretty strong this guy.
Well, thanks. I've got to already have to bust out those censors.
That's the only one I got.
Less than 3 minutes in.
That's the only one I got. I was saving it for just that moment.
I'm much more just like lukewarm to his.
Yeah.
Like you guys are all like, oh, this guy's the worst, and I hate him. I'm like, I think he made some good points.
I mean, he made good points, but his tone when I was reading it just came off as, it rubbed me the wrong way, and I'm like, I know he's making some very great points, but I want him to fail just because of the tone of this article.
There was a very nitpicky point I had where I got halfway through the article and he uses the word alas. And I said, you suck. Like, I'm sorry, it's just old-timey England. Go screw yourself.
Okay, calm down.
And it changed my perception of the rest of the article, but...
Alas, Ben, we have to move on with our podcast.
Everyone now has to use the word alas as many times as you can in this podcast.
This freaking window.
That's what you get for punning your brother to death. So, Ben, since you were the first to talk up and say that you disagree with him, I think you should be the first to bring a game then to the table to like say, I think this game, because in the article he brings up a couple of games, BioShock and Gone Home, kind of the peak among them as...
Especially two that we've talked about today.
Yeah, and we've talked about these in story mode, so you can go and listen to yourself.
Please do it.
That's the sound of you guys clicking other links, right? I can't really hear that well in the past and not in your room.
Oh, wow. I've never heard a plug go so loud.
Coming from you, Bert, it's okay.
Listen, we're just three guys and a lass around here.
But yeah. So he kind of talks about BioShock and Gone Home, and he mentions the game What Remains of Edith Finch. Only Taylor's played that, so we're not going to be talking too much about that. But yeah, and about sort of where these games succeed and fail in terms of narrative and how they present their narrative. But I guess, Ben, what do you have perhaps as a counterexample? Or if you want to talk about
Well, I was going to touch upon Gone Home because it's a game that I played that I enjoyed, but it does have that derogatory term of walking simulator, and I can understand that he poses the idea that I couldn't help but think about a lot. Because I asked the question, why couldn't Gone Home have been a movie? And the answer I can come up with, because I thought about it from a lot of different angles since I played it, and I said, because it would ultimately be boring. It wouldn't be that interesting to watch a single character walk through a building and discover the history of her sister unless you did some really creative flashbacks. But at that point, it's just like, where are we going with this? And I think hitting upon the idea that video games are an interactive narrative kind of platform. It's different than books, unless you do choose. If you want to throw the example of choose your own adventure, I do not, because they're a very small niche of books in general. You're looking at a whole new medium that is almost 30 years plus. Actually, you could probably even say a safe bet of 30 years in the making, that it's been slowly evolving and making its name. You think about film, when it first started in 1898, I believe it was, you had a still shot of a train.
I feel like equivalently, if you were to compare video games to film, I think we're equivalently about around early Frank Capra era.
Yeah, probably.
For those of us that don't know film, what does that mean?
That's like 1930s. It's like
have we introduced sound now?
Yes,
okay.
Like,
we have talkies.
Yes, I feel like sound.
Do we have color yet or no?
No.
Okay.
That's not until 39.
I feel like we're kind of in that position, because I feel like sound would probably be the closest in film, would be the closest analog to 3D in video games. Because they both threw both of those mediums for a real loop and kind of set back in terms of the kind of stories and the kind of quality of movies that they're making, set them both back. Film much less loved, I think, than video games. But, I guess I'm going to play devil's advocate, because I kind of explained that I would before we started recording. But do you think then, because you said it would be boring, do you think that might be more of a criticism then at the game's overall story, that the game's story actually isn't as engaging as you might think?
To me, it's kind of not the point. When I watch a movie, or my personal beliefs of let's just broaden out to a typical audience member watching a movie or reading a book, you are experiencing something. You're going through an experience. That is the most important thing. The story could be as simple as, for video games, save the princess, or going to film, kill the bad guy. But the video games, what it's brought to the table is the interactive feature. That is its whole core of its mechanic, is that you are a part of the story in one way or another. And that is why, as a video game, Gone Home works, because you are interacting and discovering it as if you were the character, more or less. And that is where I find that it works as a video game, but it doesn't work as any other medium, and where video games do have that kind of a leg up in certain ways. It's why, somebody name a truly good video game adaptation movie.
Wait, video game adaptation of a movie?
Or a movie adaptation of a video game, I should say.
Yeah, because if you go the other way, there are some half-decent video game movie video games. But the other way around is the best you get is Warcraft or Prince of Persia, which is...
Yeah, even then, we're getting.
But I think that's definitely
a whole bag of worms.
Because I think part of that, just to simplify that to Myron, is I think that there hasn't been a director or production company that knows how to approach translating a video game, because in translating out the interactivity element into something else. Yeah, because that's the hardest part. Is it's not too difficult to add that to something and find something worthwhile, but to take that out, I think has been a challenge that no studio or director has been able to figure out just yet.
And since film has also been experimenting with first-person views, there's been a couple. They've been experimenting with it. We may start seeing things like Gone Home, stories like Gone Home, where it comes from the first person in theaters, but I just don't think it will translate as well as it was if you were playing the game.
I just had a thought. Coming to theaters 2018, the first Let's Play movie. Admittedly, there probably will be at some point.
I aim to be that.
Better get working, Bertus.
The guy makes multiple mentions throughout how video games will never compare to films or books or even television, even though he's really derogatory towards television. I'm just like, have you been on Iraq the last 5 years? Personal thing, moving on. The problem is that it seems like the age-old argument that happens whenever a new medium comes around. You had books saying, films will never outdo books. I would argue that there are quite a few films that outdo books. Whether they're an adaptation of said book, or they're just a movie on its own that has no relation to a book. I think saying one outdoes the other or doesn't compare is totally relative, and I think that there's just as many bad movies as there are bad books.
Absolutely.
Arguably, probably more bad books.
I think more the angle is, because you can see it as from sort of a standpoint of, I don't want to say historical, but from artistically, sure, because it isn't that they overtook in terms of quality; it's that they overtook in terms of importance. When we talk about the big thing like that we all watched or participated in terms of a fiction. It's a movie or a TV show nowadays. It isn't a book like it would have been 50, 60 years ago, although that probably was more TV show movie then too. So that's pretty much what it is, and it's like it's shifting again into video games to a degree with our generation.
And it was actually, the next thing I was going to point out, by the time a lot of us are having leadership roles, what is it, like every 7 out of 10 people, I can't remember where I pulled the statistic from, but I did it researching, like every 7 out of 10 people had played a video game extensively who would be in these leadership roles. And it's going to be a point that is going to be so ingrained in our growing up. And it already is.
Yeah.
That it's just like, it feels like the Ian is like almost resisting that by saying that video games should not have a story. And it's just like, well, you mentioned this before recording. It's just like, well, you can't not have a story. They're always going to be there. You can't just mindlessly play something, and I mean, you could.
Well, I think his point is that the story of a video game should be the one that you make, not the one that the game is trying to tell you.
Which I see some validity to it, because there's a little bit of this, and I'll have Taylor talk about this a little bit more. But with Telltale games, they're great. They're fascinating. I think they're usually pretty well written. But
usually, Ben, that sounds like you might get a.
There's a couple I haven't played. But there are moments, if you've watched our Game of Thrones Let's Play, you'll know, there are moments that you can't control. There are moments where an event has to happen to spur the other characters into their own actions. And that does take away the pure agency, yeah. But at the same time, you have a game like, this is going to be a strange one to throw out, because people are going to be like, what are you talking about? Bloodborne.
What are you talking about?
Thank you. Bloodborne is a very rich and intensive story that does use a lot of ideas as approaching a story like a book or a movie would, and using metaphors and doing a lot of things to tell the story in more interactive ways. You learn the story by reading items, by picking up a few pieces of paper lying around, or exhausting dialogue options with characters, and you do that because you're like, I want to know more. And if you look at everything as you keep moving through, outside of the huge H.P. Lovecraft influence that you get into the later half of the game and how that plays in anything. I mean, the game is literally the metaphor of menstruation cycles and abortion. And that's kind of tapping surface level of that. And to me, that's pretty fascinating to play this game that I have put hours of frustrating time into and had a lot of fun with, but like it's just as engaging.
I do want to take you to task a little bit on Bloodborne though, because while I was pretty much just playing devil's advocate just to kind of promote some good conversation. I think you got some good points out of the Gone Home stuff. Bloodborne to me is one of those where it's like I almost want to side a little bit more with Mr. Bogast on this, because it's sort of Bloodborne is one of those games where it's like the narrative and the gameplay are almost entirely separate from each other. There are a couple of small instances here, and it mostly comes down to like set dressing and stuff like that, where it's like, okay, well, here's the world that I inhabit, so I can see it and what it looks like. But aside from that, it's sort of like I feel like in general you can play through all of Bloodborne and know nothing about the story, and you'll have just as much of an enjoyable time, perhaps, as someone who does. That doesn't mean that like there isn't plenty of story in there, but I think it almost would help promote his argument more than yours to bring up Bloodborne, because it's the kind of game that I think it would work just fine as a novel, and pretty much has, because like again, you point out H.P. Lovecraft and all the influence, and there's tons of good books like that. But Burtis seems to have a point over here.
If I can just interject with that, just because of what you just said, if somebody can enjoy it without playing the storyline, wouldn't that make it a better medium than someone who would have to read all the intersection about the story?
I mean, I suppose, but like my point is because it's like without a story, but like you're then making the story for yourself, and that's
right.
Kind of, I
but
think,
I mean,
point.
they're giving you more options that way, because there is story that's available to you, or there's story that you can make up for yourself.
I'm not saying because I'm not trying to argue the quality of the medium of video games entirely. I'm just trying to point out as an example of storytelling and narrative and what works well. I feel like Bloodborne is in some ways a good example, but in others not so great because of the way it's presented.
It's an interesting thought. I don't know, because I mean, I keep coming back to the words that we've already echoed a couple times. Are we're like, you're going to put your own story together anyways.
Yeah.
Like, I challenge anybody to play through that game and just be completely mindless about it. Also, you die 1,000 times.
Well, I mean, yeah, I mean, sure.
But like a narrative, like, is there, and you're a part of it no matter what. and it belongs there in my opinion. Like there's no way around it. The guy almost seems like with an asinine argument to have. You can't not have a story. That's my.
Well, that's true. I think that's again. I don't think that's the point of this article, but I don't know. Let's kind of move on here. We'll move on to like the next person and see what they promote, because I feel like this is a conversation direction that's just going to get like.
Lost.
Yeah, Ben's face is stiffening up slightly, and I'm like, oh, I'm turning this in the wrong direction. Maybe I'm playing too much the devil's advocate. But you mentioned Taylor in Telltale Games.
So I wanted to touch on the story aspect of Telltale Games, and I know that one of his big things that he kind of talked about was that the stories of video games are very they're going to be stuck in that teen adolescence right now. They're not very, which I can agree with. There are some stories where it's predictable as the dawn, and you're just like, okay, like. Yes, but I also there's another one actually that we may have that's a good one, but I wanted to talk about like how when it comes to video games, the way the story is presented to you, the viewer, is a big part of how it's created. Because again, I think the biggest kind of argument for this is Game of Thrones, because that story is already established, but. It's more of a like, you know, he talks about having complete agency, and that's the only way a video game can be truly good is for complete agency. But with complete agency, like, so say if we did Game of Thrones, if you had complete agency, pretty sure we could have tried to slit Ramsay's throat right away. And
yeah, I would say complete agency is just a ridiculous idea.
It's a ridiculous idea.
You don't have a complete agency in your own life.
Yeah, like that's undoable. But we also know that Ramsay plays a huge part in Game of Thrones and how things are set into motion. So we can't really have that free agency. We need to follow with there is a certain storyline that needs to be followed, but let a player explore within that storyline.
So you're talking about kind of specifically about the Game of Thrones Telltale Games, and about how it kind of happens in between the rest of Game of Thrones, and involves some of the characters, but because those characters have to go back and be in the TV series, because I think it happens between season 3 and 4 mostly.
That's what I could gather, because they're about to go kill the usurpers.
Yeah.
So, like, you couldn't have, like, you couldn't kill off a character who shows up in season 4 in this storyline that happens before that season, because that wouldn't make sense, even though it would be, like, perhaps better for player agency.
Yeah, for player agency, absolutely. I would see people who would just completely try to kill Ramsay or try to kill Cersei, but it's like, you can't do that. Yeah. You can't do that. And this game explores one of the for those that haven't played it, explores one of the minor families within Game of Thrones of the North called the Foresters. And we go through their...
They're not in the series at all, are they?
They're not in the series. I do believe they are mentioned in the... I do believe they are mentioned, and they're in A History of Fire and Ice.
I bet you could find them in the back of the books where they have all the character names.
Well, I've literally got it like right up there, and I'm not going to go get it. But
if I'm not mistaken, they do make a mention of them with minor spoiler at the end of the last season when they're swearing fealty to Jon.
That could be. I have to go back and watch the episode.
Yeah, I've been curious to watch back now.
But getting back on the point.
Yeah, this isn't the Game of Thrones podcast.
Yeah. Getting back on the point, which I kind of lost listening to you too. You're going through their struggles, and again, they don't have complete. Like in real life, they don't have complete agency. If they were to have complete agency, they would be done. They had to. You have to follow a certain protocol almost to kind of get where you are. And sometimes it's being aggressive as hell. Sometimes it's trying to be diplomatic, and sometimes it's trying to be sneaky, or you're going to act a certain way, and that's all up to you. How you want the story to play out is all up to you.
But I guess, okay, here's a question I have for you then. Because I realize that this actually puts us in an interesting position, you bringing up Game of Thrones as your example, because this is something we have a direct comparison to in terms of there's a TV show.
Yes.
That is amazing.
Yeah.
And here's this series, a game series that is... I don't know, how do you feel it compares to the TV show? I feel
it's an excellent addition. So if you were to compare this game against Game of Thrones, obviously Game of Thrones is going to shine out because we've got it's more developed as a story, more we got more visuals, more things.
Yeah, I think just production values alone are going to be like,
production value.
More going behind it.
But if you think of it together, it's a great addition to the story for Game of Thrones fans to feel like they're a part of it. They're not sitting there watching helplessly, except for the one instance with Ethan. They feel like they have that I can go in and I can do this. Yeah. Stop.
You guys are getting real close to spoiler territory and talking about things like if they haven't played the game, they're not going to have any idea what you're talking about.
Okay, well, hopefully this intrigues them to play the game, and they go play the game and find out for themselves. But like, there's still, but it still holds.
So I guess the question then is, does interactivity add something worthwhile to the Game of Thrones universe and narrative?
Yes, absolutely. I do think that interactivity really does help, like when you get to choose what you say to Tyrion, what you say to Cersei, and how you would...
I was going to say the biggest example is Griff. Standing up to Griff.
Yes.
That was a huge moment I've talked to with a lot of people, and a lot of people don't stand up to him. But
explain, because I have no idea what you're talking about currently.
Okay, so there's a moment where Griff, the son of the White Hills, do you want to take
Yes, this is... So... This is one of the most pivotal moments where your house has been taken over by your kind of like your enemy, and the fourthborn son, which is kind of an insult having a fourthborn take over your fortress, is now in charge, and he demands that you basically you kneel to him and you submit to him, and openly every time you can refuse and you cannot back down, and that's one of the bigger moments is that you just keep getting back up because he keeps kicking you to the ground and you get back up and he tells you, I will kill you if you get back up. You get back up. I will kill your family. You get back up. So you get that kind of hell yeah agency that you normally don't feel in Game of Thrones. You do feel those hell yeah moments, but it's more like that finally a character got what they deserved. But this time it's you. It's you getting that yeah moment. Not from watching someone else, but from you doing something that affects the story and how it goes out. And I think that's why, and that's a really big boon to this game, was you get these moments that normally that glory goes to other characters, but you feel that glory and that like righteousness of, yeah, I did this, versus watching Daenerys like burn something alive. You're like, yeah, go girl, but this is like, yeah, go me. And it's and that's like a big part of this. It's like yeah, I'm awesome. Oh man, I didn't mean to swear. I'm sorry.
I think in this context, it's not as bad.
Yeah, but it's like it's such a.
You've been a potty mouth, so you have to clean your guys out. Soap.
Dirty now.
On soap mode. It's just a flash game Chris invented to wash your mouth
Super
out.
Boy.
Anyways.
Yeah. Derail.
Yes, Taylor.
I'm having deja vu. I've seen this moment.
I think you made a very clear and good point.
Yeah. Well done. Bravo.
That was pretty much the end of it, anyway.
Yes.
Congratulations. I want to give Bertus a chance to talk because he hasn't really had much to say yet.
Okay, so a lot of what I'm just going to start off with is kind of touch on what Ben and Taylor have already talked about. Mostly, starting with Ben, it's a new medium as far as media. Yes, it's been around for 30 years, but as far as like actual games that involve storytelling and correct like choices, we're really only seeing birth of that in the last like 10, 15 years. I think a lot of it is we just need to give more time to develop, and I think you were right that we probably need to be a little harder on the actual game developers to come up with a better and more...
Well, I haven't said that yet. I'll say
Spoiler!
that. I'll say that. Way to spoil the end of our story mode.
But I think a lot of it is just we need to, give it more time because we're seeing a lot of growth as far as.
I guess my question is like, where do you stand though? Like, do you agree with him? Like, you think games work better with less story or more story?
I would say that I think games work just fine no matter which end they're on. I don't think that either side necessarily means you're going to have a better story because you're playing a game that has a high narrative or a game where you make up your own narrative in between. I think that video games introduce an entirely new medium where it doesn't matter how strong the narrative is. That games are games and are enjoyable to whoever plays them because everybody has different tastes.
Well, I think that's the advantage of a game narrative in general is that like, even if you do a game narrative that's not great, just by the very nature of wanting to have something answered for yourself, you can sometimes pull people through a narrative by just having something simple there.
I don't disagree with that.
Because to kind of highlight that idea, is like a game I remember I loved when I was like playing as a kid, and I thought like it had a great story until I replayed it like within the last 5 years and realized, man, there's like nothing to this. Actually, was Secret of Mana. It's like this game is like, it feels really big and epic when you're like playing through it maybe the first time, but I've realized, man, my brain filled in a whole lot of extra story there in like the intervening time that really wasn't there. Like, it's great story that my brain filled in, but that really wasn't all there. It was pretty much very basic. And
even more recently, when we were playing Super Meat Boy, we have the very basic story premise, and we have a predictable end goal. And in between, we're getting really small snippets of like what the story actually is. But we're kind of just playing through because levels exist for us.
Because it's a challenge. It's fun to complete the challenge rather than to find out what's going to happen.
Well,
because we know what's going to happen, probably.
Yeah, but even then, I mean, I think the reward of completing a level that gives you a small tidbit of story is actually made more rewarding because of the challenge you have to go through in order to get it. And I think that's something the video games bring that books and movies can't.
That's true. One of my favorite... what's that comedian? Dara O'Brien has this brilliant bit about how games, in their challenge, is like, no book is ever going to stop you at the end of the first chapter and go, what were the major themes and major character names of this? And then, like, close if you can't get it right. Sorry, you've got to reread chapter 1.
I guess it also is that huge, like, instant gratification and reward system of doing things that also you don't get from movies and books that you get from video games, which is probably why video games are becoming more popular.
And, well, I guess that's something else I want to bring up, is everybody has, like, their different, like, learning skill. Like, some people learn through demonstration, interaction, or just being told. Books carry one form where you're being told a narrative. Movies kind of show you, like, you can watch it happen and it's demonstrated for you. Video games, you get to interact with everything.
Yeah.
You're going to remember it better some people will, just because they play it and they experience it.
It's a really interesting comparison. I never really put together.
And then it also has the other two where you're being told or you're being shown. So if you learn differently, there's probably some way.
I'm trying to remember the terms for this, but I know that for video games,
visual learning, audio learning, and
kinetic is
the
last one, is the one I can remember.
Yeah.
But video games are a kinetic experience. So.
And so I don't think it's really fair for people to say books are better than video games or movies or whichever medium you're
experiencing. I don't think I don't like the idea of it being a competition to begin with, because books do certain things way better than movies ever do. Like, if I want to get into a single character's head, a book is going to do that.
Yes. Oh, absolutely.
Way better than a movie is going to do that. However, if I want to like watch an experience that's like a big battle experience or something like that, like something that's hard to picture in your head because there's just so many moving pieces, a movie or TV show is really great for that.
Lord of the Rings is the first one that pops in my head. The battles are much more epic.
And even then, I would say, like, if I want to get emotionally into a character's headspace, I think a movie or a TV show is a little bit better for that because of the way visuals can communicate emotion better than words can.
I might argue against that, and like, if you get a good book where I've had times where a book has gotten me more emotionally invested than the movie has.
I don't think it's not possible. But I don't know. As someone who's also like done a lot, like, I think just the way a small, like, you can do a lot more with a lot less in film than you can in books. Like, you can use one shot, one simple...
That might take 7 pages in a book.
Yeah.
I think there's also the difference between people who learn visually and people who can learn by being told.
There might also be.
And this may be like... And that's where video games kind of conjoins all three, and it becomes... kind of a thing, because I just noticed the big difference between you and I were just how we approached it. I'm like, no, a book, and you're like, no, a movie.
And I just want to point out that video games also do have the power to do that, as Ben brought up before we actually started this, The Last of Us. I mean, we have Joel, whose character admittedly takes several hours to get there, but we see his character development, and you're actually a part of it. You experience it in a way that I don't think a book could necessarily show you, because of the choices he has to make and because of what you're doing in the world. You experience it because you have to make hard decisions.
Sort of. I think because it's interestingly, I don't know if you've ever read the book The Road, is very similar tonally, thematically to The Last of Us.
Yeah.
Yes, but
so I think they have very by the end of their book, like the end of their thing, is very similar experiences. They're only slightly different in the way they end and the way they present themselves. And I don't want to spend a whole lot of time comparing, because I don't think that's to our advantage.
And
it doesn't really, like, again, it's sort of a case by case basis. Does this story work better here? Does it work better here? How about here? And I think a lot of the stronger and weaker cases are just this sense of, well, maybe this story would have been better as a movie. Maybe this story would have been better as a book. Maybe this one would have been better as a video game.
Agreed.
I actually agree with that completely. I think that's part of why I feel like his article was a big fallacy.
Yeah.
He picks out 3 of a very small niche of video games that...
Yes.
I mean, they tell a story, but they do it in such a way that...
It's
Well, they all do it
like watching a movie.
Yeah, they all do it in the exact same way. He doesn't
Yeah.
pick out a game that tries to tell a story in a different way.
Yeah.
Like, if he were to tackle Dragon Age Inquisition and Gone Home, and then, like, maybe doing something like Call of Duty or something, like, would you cover the broad spectrum of things? Then it's a bit more... I would take his opinion more seriously, rather than him doing these kind of walkthrough games. So... Yeah, I mean, again, I feel like he needed a much more broader choice for video games to discuss his argument, because it's a great argument. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
He just picked a very narrow niche.
Yeah, that's the kind of thing that needed.
Short-sighted is what I wrote all over my notes.
It's just a paper with like 50 lines. Short-sighted.
Yeah,
Bastard.
I guess despite the fact that I've been probably the most like supportive of the guy's argument, because there are points that I really agree with and like really sit with me. Is like I like that at least that someone is saying this, because I think someone should be saying this. However, there is, I think, one game to me that kind of its mere existence disproves everything he has to say, and that's Papers, Please. It's this little indie game where you play as a border security checkpoint guard, just agent. Like, you review people's papers as they come into the country, and it's essentially like some Eastern European, Ukraine type country.
Yeah, Erestolska.
And the game, there's almost no plot told to you not through the gameplay. It's pretty much you get like a title screen and like here are the basic like tasks of your job. You got to review these people's papers and that's it. And you just pretty much press start, and the whole game is just you looking at people's papers and the people coming up to you. And there's a lot of recurring characters keep trying to get into the country, and like usually you have to just keep kicking them out because they don't have their stuff in order, or they might be spies or something. But within this, there's this whole like almost networked story that is entirely based on the choices and the way that you play the game. And it's at the end of the day, you're always given the score of how well were you able to feed your family, and like your family will start to die if you start doing your job poorly, and you'll have to start making choices about which ones you will and won't feed, and how you spend your money, and if you and like if you will spend the money on the power bill this week. And it's amazing because it's all the stuff that's told you through your choices and gameplay, but it's telling you the story. But there's also another story underneath it about what's going on in the country that people are trying to get into, and about how there may be freedom fighters that you can assist to get into the country, but it might hurt you at your job, so you might not be able to save your family at the expense of trying to... It's amazing, and it's all told to you within your actions within this game.
Yes, and within your little cubicle.
But none of this would be anywhere near as potent as it was if there weren't the story behind it. If there were no story behind this gameplay would be empty and void and meaningless. But because that story's there, this gameplay is if you like, I highly recommend everyone play Papers, Please. At least just a few hours, because I think it's like $5 at this point too.
Yeah, it's inexpensive.
Or in my case, pre-downloaded. Thank you, Taylor.
And it's an amazing experience. It's really worth playing, and I think it alone just kind of disproves Mr. Bogast's article about how games are better with stories. Here's a game that is distinctly better because it has a story, that is distinctly more meaningful because it has a story, and because the story and the gameplay work together. But I think that then leads me into like what my part 2 is of kind of my point, which is that there aren't enough games like this. And I think part of it is because game reviewers are not being hard enough on game writers.
Yeah.
Where they're letting things slide. Like, I think The Last of Us is really good, but I mean, maybe it's because it's a story that I've experienced a couple times before. Like, I'd read The Road before.
Yes.
I had
seen the movie adaptation.
I played BioShock. That has a lot of similar stuff to it. BioShock Infinite.
Yeah.
And gosh, was there? There's like something like a movie I'm trying to think of, but it's not coming to me.
Logan.
No, that's later. Something before that. But it's sort of like, I think there's a lot of great stuff to it, and I love that like Naughty Dog came forward and did this often very nuanced story that even ends at just such a, why did we have this as the end point? This is so strange, but like I really enjoy that for it. I want to see a lot more of that, and I want to see that kind of like bring it up a lot. I love that influence then went into Uncharted 4, and there's a lot of that in that. It's a much better story than the other 3 Uncharteds combined.
Yeah. Easily.
I think a lot of it may just be like there's some people who are really starting to get it. What you do to a video game to make the story really good and engaging, and complementary to the gameplay rather than just alongside it.
Yeah. And I do realize that game developers do have to worry about the mechanics of the game, because you can have the best story in the world, but if your mechanics are absolutely horrible, no one's going to play it.
Right.
And no one's going to discover the story. So I do understand that there is their struggle between
Probably
how do
no.
we make this work.
Superman 64 could be the greatest game of all time.
I can say it right now. It's
Controls
not.
are terrible.
I don't know what you're getting at, Ben. But it's nothing that's anywhere near the truth.
I think we do. Like, I mean, we should be harder on game writers and developers to be better at creating a story that integrates well with the mechanics, but we should have some understanding that we know that's not an easy task.
But you know what's great? Why I like that we're saying this is because that's why we're here.
Yeah.
That's story mode's purpose, man. Come back next time for we're gonna start getting into this and digging into it and finding games and talking about games and getting mean about maybe some of them, like Bloodborne. I don't know.
I don't know either.
But yeah, so that's kind of, I guess that's mostly the points that we had to make. I mean, I got to talk there for like 5 minutes and no one interrupted me, and I can't stop interrupting everyone else. So unless someone would like to say something without me interrupting them at this point.
You'll still interrupt us.
I will.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think everybody made great points.
Yeah.
I think this guy should play more games.
Yeah.
And I also want him to look at his research, his point again, and compare it against bigger titles like we've mentioned, and go back and...
Or other genres.
Or other genres, or even that, like... And rewrite the article, and see what he thinks later, because I think he's making great points. I just think that the small choices of games he chose were just a bit off, and again, for people who play video games so much as we do, it's just like, well, you're just ignoring all these great games. So I think if he were to take more and to delve into it more and redo this article and do a reconsideration, I would happily read it, because...
I don't think we're going to get that out of
No,
him.
I don't.
Mostly because I know a couple of years ago he wrote an article about how video games are better without characters, which
Really?
I also vastly disagree with.
Oh, boy.
But the man just does not seem to really care for video games.
Okay.
Remember the explicitive I said at the first 2 minutes? I won't repeat it, but I do enforce it.
Alright, well...
Thanks. I don't have to censor anything.
Yeah.
I was hoping you guys would talk for longer. I was trying my best not to say anything.
I guess my whole takeaway from this
Is that why your
is...
face is blue?
Let's all give credit to Valve, because, they're clearly taking their time creating the storyline and the controls game for Half-Life 3.
Shut your dirty mouth before Chris starts crying.
I've given up hope. Like, that's just something that's just like, if it ever shows up, okay.
Yeah.
I've stopped caring.
Yeah.
I've moved on.
Yeah.
You do.
You hear that, Valve? This is what you've done.
But yeah, as we're saying, it's like, I'd like to see Mr. Bogas. It's like, yeah, I'd like to see this too. I'd be surprised if he listens to us.
Yeah.
If you're listening, Ian, thanks.
Yeah.
We're maybe these guys like really angry at you. I was interested. I don't mind someone writing something that's like,
Yeah, I don't
provocative
mind.
and getting me angry,
Yeah.
getting my blood pressure.
We get
Well, that
this.
I do mind a little bit.
We get a cease and desist letter. Anyways.
Also, since you are a doctor, I've got this little lump under
Smart Curtis, get it.
Alright.
Not that kind of
We are going to wrap this up.
Yeah,
Came
thank
back.
you very much for listening to Story Mode. This is our sort of pilot episode. As we move forward, we're gonna have a little bit more of a format, and for our next one, we're gonna be talking about antagonists. So we're just gonna bring to the table one antagonist that we think really, I don't know, hangs the moon, I guess.
Dun, dun, dun,
I guess it'd be the
dun,
opposite
dun.
of that. Steals the moon, blows up the moon. The
Ransoms off the moon.
Yeah, the antagonist that really does that for us.
Or leaves you on the
Spaceballs.
moon if you play a game differently.
Yeah, too. So, Yeah, again, thank you very much for listening to Story Mode. If you happen to find us on YouTube, give us a subscribe. And if not, you may have heard, if you happen to find us through iTunes or something else, you may have heard us mentioning Let's Plays and stuff like that. Come check out our YouTube channel at youtube.com/watch Co-Operatives. You can also throw us tweets if you want to, like you have a great suggestion for, I don't know, future topics or something. I'm sure that will be more obvious in future episodes, but you can send us a tweet at WatchPostF5. Thank you very much again for listening, guys. We'll catch you later.
Bye.
Bye-bye!